Vauban is getting a bit of a touch-up on February 11th to his abilities along with his brand new Heirloom skin, so let's break down the changes coming to our local train conductor. First up, his passive is getting a bit of a clarification that its bonus damage is multiplicative. However, the second point makes me wonder if it means that electrical damage will now also be one of the things to trigger the passive, or if it's changing to be only electrical damage activating it, and I personally assume that it's the former of the two. They'll also be doing a general pass on the wording of his other abilities to note which of them scale with enemy levels. Tesla Nervos are getting a pretty nice buff. With their status chance scaling with power strength, they'll be coded to spread out a bit more away from each other to maximize their effectiveness, ragdolled enemies will now be affected by them, and they're getting some visual effects improvements for both the normal version getting a trail effect so that you can keep track of where they're going, and the augments getting some kind of visual cue above enemies' heads, I imagine kind of like the mecha set. Currently, Mind Layer is one of the abilities that has a rotating wheel to choose which of the 4 different mines that you'll cast, but with the update it'll be turned into a full tap-hold cast ability, with Flechette Orb and Tether Coil combined as one choice and Vector Pad paired up with Overdriver for the other. The Vector Pad will also be giving a movement speed buff along with Overdrive's damage, which the latter of the two will now also affect your equipped companion, so yay, a stealth buff for those. Photon Strike's also getting some improvements as well. It'll now apply a Force Blast status proc, deal double damage to Overguard, cost less energy, have a wider AoE, and enemies in Bastille won't get Tenno Space programmed by Photon Strike anymore. The augment's also getting a bit of a buff as it will increase from 2 strikes to 3. And lastly, we have Bastille and Vortex, which Vortex isn't apparently really getting any changes. Bastille, on the other hand, is getting a bunch of improvements. It's no longer going to have a cap on the number of enemies it can affect at once, the armor buff is getting increased and it and the armor removal will be quicker, which we'll have to see what those numbers look like once we have them in our hands, and ragdoll enemies will be properly affected by Bastille's armor strip. However, both Bastille and Vortex are getting a cap on the number that you can have active, which is 3 of each, but honestly I feel like that's a fair trade-off as like Pablo said in the Devstream, that's kind of the standard thing now these days for these types of abilities. Also, the augment won't yeet enemies back anymore, but instead increase the duration of it by 2 seconds for each enemy slain in Bastille's AoE. Overall, these seem like great changes, however I do have some criticisms and requests for the rework, but we'll be discussing that in tomorrow's short. For now, as always, sub for more tips and swing by my stream if you need any help.